Welcome back to Property Investment with AIN, the Alternative Investor Network, right here on Thrive. Property investment is a significant tool that you can utilize to really get yourself to financial freedom and independence. But doing so needs a lot of care and a lot of caution as well. But if you get yourself educated, you are already in front of the bunch, ahead of the curve. What we want to achieve in property investment is to get ourselves educated, to know that we can collaborate with a lot of people in the same area and expertise, and share with like-minded peers in the arena. So when it comes to property investment, we've run the numbers, had a good introduction in terms of property investment, but now we need to look into the different types of strategies that there are in property investment. And we need to also consider the fact that some of these strategies will have a long-term benefit, while some of them will have a shorter-term result in terms of making money and bringing you from a point of dependency to financial freedom. Remember, it's going to take you to get active and take action. That's what it's going to take from your side. All right, so let's just recap. When we talk about property investment, what strategies are there? All right, so we all know buy to let as a strategy. You get a property, you get a property and you rent it out, and the tenant pays you rental income, and that can also subsidize your bond. All right, for some it's a great avenue, for some it is not so great. So we need to also keep in mind that when we look at buy to let, due diligence, remember we ran the numbers, is really critical when you look at buy to let as a property investment strategy. Flipping, meaning that you actually get a property, you acquire the property and you fix it up, you renovate it, put some lipstick on, a lick of paint, and you sell it, making a profit. Commercial, looking at spaces and places where you can house businesses or small business or entrepreneurs to help them in their commercial and also enterprises. Also, student accommodation is one of the fast yielding property investment strategies that can yield results quite quickly. When you look at multi-lets, they're at the bottom left. It's making sure that you get a property that's big, probably big enough, and you chop it up into different sections, but we'll dive into that. Developments, when you drive on the highway and you see all these developments popping up, that is specifically what we are talking about. When we look at township developments, do you have a plot of land or a piece of land that you can chop up and zone that you can actually start developing on? And also, just behind my face there at the bottom is actually the icon for short-term rentals, also known as Airbnb, which is also one of the faster yielding property investment strategy in terms of getting money in as a secondary or maybe as a primary source of income at some point in your journey. All right, but let's start with the first strategy when it comes to property investment. Let's look at multi-lets. All right, so do you know what a multi-let is? I'm going to give you a moment to think about it. All right, so multi-lets is literally a property that you can divide into different sections or pieces and rent them out as units. All right, so let's take, for instance, if you buy a house in, let's say, Randburg somewhere. All right, remember, not an affluent area, but maybe somewhere on the orange side. Remember, we spoke about the different zones, all right? So let's say we pay 1.2 million for that maybe 3-bedroom house. All right, so we need to look at that property then. If we want to turn it into a multi-let, then you can either rent out the property as a whole to a tenant. All right, so what could you possibly ask for that property? I would say in the region of about 12,000 Rand, right? But when you look at a multi-let and you chop that property into 3 different sections, bedroom, and you make sure that you get to a point where you actually set up a small bathroom and a kitchen, that is possible, then you can rent out that property to 3 different people at roughly about, let's say in Randburg, we're looking at between 67,000 Rand when it comes to rental income. So you can make roughly about 18 to 20,000 Rand on that same property if you play your cards right. That's why multi-lets is actually such a popular way to look at property investment, because it can yield you a lot more in terms of the finances. All right, money in bank, that's what we are aiming for. So when it comes to property investment, we need to make sure that we always keep an open mind when it comes to property investment, because a property can be utilized in a number of ways to generate some extra income. All right, so multi-lets, as I said, it is more to the side of communes and shared living spaces. So you need to decide how you would like to structure this property specifically if you want to look at multi-lets. All right. Multi-lets are self-contained units with no shared facilities, where communes have shared facilities and spaces inside the property. All right. You can actually access a home loan for this. And also you need to remember that if you want to finance this through a commercial loan through the bank, you will only get roughly about 70% or so of the loan to value amount. And also you need to look at a 10-year repayment period. So it might be a bit more expensive, but also this is one of those property investment strategies that can really, really work for you. All right, so let's look at a case study in terms of multi-lets. Good. So when you look at converting a space into multiple units, you need to remind yourself also, or remember, that you need to have, in some instances, special consent from the council, the city council, when it comes to adding more kitchens. Because in Gauteng, when you have more than 2 kitchens on a standard earth, you need to actually have special consent from the city council. Remember, it's all about infrastructure, and you need to be able to tap into that in terms of having people rent your units and giving them sufficient flow in terms of services, etc., and infrastructure. All right, so looking at this property here, right there, can you quickly guess how many units did this person get from this property in terms of a multi-let? I'm going to give you a moment. All right, so in this case, this person chopped up this property, so to speak, into multiple sections. So when we look at this multi-let deal, they managed to have 1 3-bedroom apartment, 2 2-bedrooms flat, 2 2-bedrooms flat, 2 2-bedrooms. So we're looking at roughly about 2, 4, 6, 9 rooms that they actually managed to do as a multi-let, which is great. So if you look at what they can charge, it's average more as you did as a multi-let than as renting it out as a sole property to a sole family or just one family. All right. What we need to remember also is we need to have special zoning in place. All right. So for different strategies, they might require different types of zoning. So do you know what zoning is? If we look at a stand where there's a lot of apartments, you need to have special permission. It's called zoning, residential zoning categories. All right. So when we look at zoning, we look at the following. All right. So residential 1 is like one dwelling on a full title earth, a piece of land. All right. That is your normal house on a stand. That is like residential 1. All right. When we look at residential 2, it's one dwelling on a full title earth or stand, which is inside an enclosed complex with a private road and a homeowners association. That means, like, you know, these complexes and estates, you drive through security and then you have to drive on a road and you get to that house. Remember, it's not an apartment, it's a house on a full title earth. All right, one dwelling. Okay, that's res 2. Residential 3 is when you have units that are joined together, like apartments and also multi-floors. So it's high density living, all right, quarters. So when you look at your 2-bedroom apartments that are stacked together, those are sort of the complexes that we are looking at when we talk about residential 3. All right. Residential 4 is more or less the same as residential 3, but you need to have extra consent options from the city council. All right. And that will push you into residential 4. And also residential 5 is something like mobile units. If you have, let's say, for instance, you know that you've got like stacker container homes, those are type of homing that you need to look at residential 5. All right, so we need to know the differences in terms of your zoning, residential 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and how that will impact you in terms of your property investment strategy. Remember, with multi-lets, you might get a residential 1, but also you need to keep in mind that you need some special consent from the city council if you want to look at multi-lets, because it means multiple geysers, multiple stoves, and multiple trash bins, if you need to look at it like that. All right, but when it comes to due diligence, we need to keep in mind that who are the people that you are going to rent out to. All right, so things like your tenant demographics, who are they? Are they young people? Are they families? Who are you going to rent out your units to, or your spaces or places? All right, are there rules and regulations that are pinned down for that property currently that you want to buy or that you are going to rent out? What rules and regulations are there? You need to also check your title deed. When you do acquire that property, before you acquire the property, you need to ask for a copy of the title deed to see what you can and what you cannot do on that property. All right. The prepayment of water, gas, and electricity is vital in order for you to make sure that you always stay cash flow positive. How are you going to look at managing the cost and the billing of that? All right. The SG diagrams, it means it's a site diagram, a geographic diagram of where the property is, how is it situated. If it's sloped, can you use that property? How can you extend? How can you maximize the income potential for that property? All right. Rates and taxes, what are we looking at there? Any other utilities that they might be on the property. Occupancy certificate. If you buy the property from someone and they say they've got a great occupancy rate, what they need to show it to you before you get that property. All right. Remember, we want to make sure that we negotiate strongly with the seller in this instance to make sure that you get a cash flow deal from day one. Remember, we make money when we buy. That's what we want to do. All right. Are we looking at individual gas meters per room? You need to request the financial and lease agreements from the previous owner if they have a multi-let that is already running to see that it is actually making a profit. And also, are there going to be communal services like garden services, Wi-Fi, and so forth? All right, you need to understand that all of these points that we've listed here need to be taken into consideration when you want to look at a multi-let specifically. Great, let's go into a case study of multi-lets. All right, so Maybe's deal, yeah. This was the deal that he struck, and as I've mentioned, there's about 9 bedrooms there, and it's really a great example of what a multi-let is. So 2 entrances can accommodate roughly about 9 to, well, depending on how you structure it, but there are enough spaces and places for someone to rent it out sufficiently. Okay, so, but you're probably asking, what are the numbers like? So let's look at the numbers. Okay, so in rent, he actually managed to get like just below 50,000 Rand a month rent, to collect rent there. The void costs, he didn't have any voids. Bond repayments is about 16,000, so he got it at about 1.65 million, the property. All right, rental insurance, 900. Rates and taxes, about 900. Levies and homeowners association, it's not in an estate, it's not in a complex, it's a freestanding house on street, so there's no levies or anything on that side. He is paying a management fee to a management agent of about 2,500 bucks, a maintenance budget, the same that he puts away for that. That leaves him with a net cash flow of 26,000 bucks per month. How awesome is that? All right, so I think what we need to take away from this is that when you look at that property and it needs to give you a return on investment, you want to go as high as you possibly can in terms of getting that return. In this case, it's got about 27% return on investment per year, which is phenomenal, by the way. All right, so what is it going to take for you to get to the point where you are going to look at a property that will be suitable for a multi-let? It means that you need to go onto Property24, myroof.co.za, go to the bank repo sites and find properties that you can arm wrestle with at a ridiculously low cost, and also making sure that when you do put in your offer, you need to put it as low as decently possible. All right, so this was multi-let property investment strategy, and we're going to move on to the next property investments section in the next module. All right, so stay tuned, and then we're going to cover the next module. That's all about flipping.